The Galactic Council chamber hummed with the usual business of 1,000 different species trying to coexist in one political body. And Ambassador Lisa Crawford sat in the human delegation seat, trying not to look as bored as she felt after 3 hours of debate about trade routes through the Xylos sector when her communicator vibrated against her wrist with an emergency code she had never seen before. Her blood ran cold as she opened the encrypted message, and the first thing she saw was the header: New Hope Colony, mass casualty event, all civilians. And her hand shook as she loaded the attached video file, while around her the Council continued debating shipping lanes as if the universe had not just broken apart. The footage showed the Harvest Festival on Kepler 442b, where 3,000 human colonists had gathered to celebrate another successful growing season. And Lisa could see children running through the crop fields with colorful ribbons while their parents set up food stalls and a band played music on a makeshift stage under the colony's dual suns that painted everything in warm orange light. Then the Krell ships appeared overhead like black knives cutting through the peaceful sky. Lisa watched in horror as the Krell warriors descended in their drop pods and began hunting civilians through the fields for sport. And she could see families trying to run while Krell soldiers laughed and fired on them from behind. And the worst part was the sound of the children screaming as they tried to hide in the tall wheat that offered no protection from thermal scanners. Video showed a young girl, no more than 7 years old, holding her baby brother while a Krell warrior approached with his weapon raised. And the girl begged for mercy in a voice so small and terrified that Lisa felt something inside her chest tear apart. And the warrior just laughed before the feed cut to static: 3,000 people gone in less than 2 hours, and 500 of them were children attending the festival's youth activities. Lisa sat frozen in her seat while the numbers scrolled across her communicator. Confirmed dead, missing, wounded beyond saving. And every single number was a person who woke up that morning expecting to enjoy a harvest festival and instead found themselves prey for aliens who killed for Entertainment Council Speaker Vexthal S. Insectoid. Voice cut through her shock as he addressed the chamber about some mundane matter. And Lisa stood up without permission, and her chair scraped loudly against the marble floor as every delegate turned to look at the human who dared interrupt proceedings. The Krell Dominion has massacred 3,000 human civilians on New Hope Colony, Lisa said in a voice that sounded distant and cold even to her own ears. And she transmitted the footage to every screen in the chamber so all the delegates could see exactly what had happened. The chamber erupted in chaos as species shouted over each other, and some delegates from peaceful races looked horrified while others from more aggressive cultures seemed merely uncomfortable. And the Krell delegation sat stone-faced and silent as if they had expected this moment to come. Eventually, Speaker Vexthal called for order, and his mechanical translator made his clicking language into something approximating diplomatic concern, as he expressed regret for the loss of human life and promised a full investigation with appropriate sanctions against the Krell Dominion. And he suggested that humanity show patience while the council worked through proper channels to address this tragedy. Lisa listened to him talk about sanctions and investigations and diplomatic censure as if paperwork could bring back 3,000 dead civilians. And she felt something fundamental shift inside her understanding of how the galaxy worked. Humanity has spent 30 years in this council trying to be the reasonable ones, Lisa said into the silence after Vexthal finished his speech, and her voice carried to every corner of the vast chamber. We come from a harsh world, and we have weapons that frighten other species, but we chose diplomacy instead of intimidation. And we accepted trade restrictions and fleet limitations and every other constraint you placed on us because we wanted to be good galactic citizens. She pulled up images of human ships defending Palak's convoys from pirates and human medics treating wounded Torlik soldiers and human engineers helping the Veska rebuild after their sun flared. And every delegate saw the pattern of humans helping and protecting and asking nothing in return, except to be treated as equals. We defended your shipping lanes and healed your wounded and built your infrastructure. Lisa continued while her hands clenched the podium so hard her knuckles turned white. We did everything you asked and followed every rule you made, and all we wanted in return was peace and the right to live without fear. She transmitted footage of the children being hunted through the wheat fields and forced every delegate to watch as Krell warriors laughed while small bodies fell among the golden stalks. And several delegates turned away, but Lisa's voice made them look back. The Krell have powerful allies and war would destabilize the sector, she said, while mimicking Vexthal earlier words with bitter precision. You want humanity to show patience, while you investigate and draft sanctions and hold committee meetings to discuss appropriate responses. But our children are dead, and your diplomatic process will not bring them back. The Krellhead delegate stood and began to speak about misunderstandings and rogue elements within their military structure, but Lisa cut him off with a gesture that would have been unthinkable in normal circumstances. Humanity is formally withdrawing from the non-aggression articles of the Galactic Charter, she announced while transmitting Earth's official statements simultaneously so no one could claim miscommunication. We tried playing by your rules, and our reward was the massacre of 3,000 civilians, including 500 children, who died terrified and alone while monsters hunted them for entertainment. The chamber exploded in protest as species shouted about galactic law and the importance of peaceful conflict resolution. But Lisa just smiled a cold smile that made several nearby delegates lean away from the human section. We're done being gentle, she said softly into her microwader while every translator in the chamber carried her words to 1,000 different species. You're about to learn why humanity has been holding back. Back on Earth, in the orbital command station that housed the Human Defense Fleet headquarters, Admiral Kyle Morrison received the authorization codes. He never thought he would actually see transmitted from the civilian government. And the message was brief and absolute. Full military authorization, no restrictions. Show them what we've been holding back, Morrison looked at the codes for a long moment while his staff waited in tense silence, and then he opened the secure channel to every human ship in the fleet, including the ones the galaxy had never seen. This is Fleet Admiral Morrison to all commands, he said while his fingers entered the unlock sequences that had sat dormant for 3 decades. New Hope Colony has been attacked by Krell forces with 3,000 confirmed civilian casualties, including 500 children. And Earth has authorized full military response with no restrictions on force or capability. He watched his tactical display light up as reserve ships powered online and classified weapon systems activated across the fleet. And every captain received the same orders simultaneously. The Krell think they know what humanity is capable of based on our patrol fleet and defensive doctrine. Morrison continued while the display showed human warships moving into attack formations. They're about to learn that we've been holding back, not because we're weak, but because we chose mercy over violence. And that choice died with 3,000 colonists, who deserve better than to be hunted like animals. His communication officer looked up from her console with wide eyes as dozens of ships began moving out from hidden berths in the asteroid belt, where they had waited for an emergency that everyone hoped would never come. Send a message to Captain Nicole Bennett on the phone. Vengeance, Morrison ordered while he pulled up the ship's classified specifications that showed capabilities far beyond anything the galaxy had seen from human vessels. She's about to get the mission she's been training for since we built that ship. And tell her that this time there are no rules. The officer transmitted the orders and Morrison watched the tactical display show the Vengeance and her sister ships beginning their burn toward Krell space at speeds that should have been impossible for vessels of their mass. And he felt no satisfaction in finally unleashing humanity's true military capability. 3,000 civilians were dead, and no amount of revenge would bring them back. but at least the galaxy would finally understand the truth about humanity. That they had been too comfortable to see before humans were never the prey species that other races assumed. And mercy was always a choice they made rather than a weakness they suffered from. And now that choice had been revoked by species too arrogant to understand the difference. Captain Nicole Bennett stood on the bridge of the EHS Vengeance and watched her crew move through activation procedures for systems that had never been used outside of classified testing, and the ship hummed with power that no alien species had ever witnessed from human vessels. As reactor cores spun up to combat capacity, the Vengeance looked like a standard human destroyer from the outside, with clean lines and modest weapons arrays that matched the defensive doctrine humanity showed the galaxy. But Bennett knew the truth about what her ship could really do when all the safeguards came off and the classified systems went live. Weapons status. She called to Lieutenant Greg Foster at the tactical station while the bridge displays lit up with targeting solutions that calculated probable outcomes. 15 moves deep into any engagement. All primary systems online and all classified packages responding. Foster reported while his console showed weapons that existed in theory for most species, but that humanity had quietly perfected over 3 decades of secret development. Kinetic barriers are holding stable, and the singularity drive is ready for combat maneuvering. Bennett nodded while she reviewed the mission orders that gave her more freedom than any human captain had possessed since Earth joined the Galactic Council. And the orders were simple and absolute. Find the Krell fleet that attacked New Hope Colony and demonstrate why humanity chose restraint all these years. She thought back to 15 years earlier when she was a young lieutenant on Commander Daniel Hayes' first contact ship during humanity's initial encounter with the Xyloth Empire. And she remembered how the Xyloth fired warning shots across their bow to test human resolve. Hayes had wanted to respond with overwhelming force to show that humans did not back down from threats, but Earth's civilian leadership ordered restraint because they feared starting an interstellar war before humanity understood galactic politics. And Hayes obeyed orders even though every instinct told him to show strength. Bennett was there when Hayes met with the Xyloth Admiral afterward and watched the alien assume that humanity's peaceful response meant weakness rather than wisdom. And she saw how that assumption spread through the galactic community until every species believed humans were soft diplomats who could be pushed around 10 years ago when Earth's military command argued for building a larger fleet to match other major powers. The Galactic Council applied pressure through trade sanctions and diplomatic isolation until Earth agreed to fleet limitations. And the Council claimed that human warships made peaceful species nervous because humans came from such a violent world. Admiral Morrison had been there in those meetings, and Bennett remembered his face when he agreed to the restrictions. And she knew he was making calculations about what humanity needed versus what the galaxy would accept. And the compromise was that Earth would build fewer ships, but never stop advancing their technology. The galaxy saw Earth's small patrol fleet and assumed they knew humanity's full capability. But they never knew about ships like the Vengeance that waited in hidden berths with weapon systems that defied current galactic understanding. Navigation. Time to crawl forward base, Bennett ordered while her tactical officer began running simulations of the upcoming engagement, 6 hours at current speed. The navigator replied, and Bennett saw the crew exchange glances because they all knew that human ships should not be able to cross that distance so quickly. The Vengeance used a drive system that compressed space-time in ways that other species considered theoretical. And the power requirements should have been impossible, except that humanity had learned to harness miniature singularities for energy generation. And every classified breakthrough made human ships more dangerous, while the galaxy remained ignorant. Bennett walked to the tactical station where Foster was reviewing weapons loadout, and she looked at the arsenal that represented 3 decades of humans preparing for a war they hoped would never come. "Show me the quantum disruptor," she said quietly while the rest of the bridge crew focused on their duties. Foster pulled up the specifications for a weapon that existed in scientific theory across the galaxy, but that only humanity had successfully weaponized. And the display showed a device that could destabilize atomic bonds at the quantum level. One shot will erase a ship from existence, Foster explained while highlighting the cascade effect that would spread through any target's molecular structure. No explosion and no debris because the matter simply stops being matter. Bennett studied the weapon while remembering all the times human diplomats smiled and nodded while other species explained why humans needed to limit their military development. And she wondered what those diplomats would think when they saw what humanity had been building in secret. Commander Stephanie Liu entered the bridge with an intelligence update about the Krell Dominion's military structure, and her analysis showed a species that relied on overwhelming force and intimidation rather than sophisticated tactics. The Krell have never faced an opponent who matched their aggression, Liu reported while displaying their combat history. They conquer weaker species and avoid conflicts with better armed powers, and their entire military doctrine assumes they're the apex predators in any engagement. Bennett looked at the data and saw the pattern of Krell behavior stretching back centuries. And every conflict showed the same approach of attacking vulnerable targets and backing down when faced with serious resistance. They hit New Hope because it was a civilian colony with minimal defenses, Bennett said while anger made her voice tight. They thought they could massacre our people, and Earth would respond with diplomatic protests. Liu nodded and pulled up footage from the massacre that made several bridge officers look away. But Bennett forced herself to watch because her crew needed to understand why they were about to become something the galaxy had never seen before. "Admiral Morrison wants us to make an example," Liu continued while highlighting Morrison's strategic objectives. "Not just defeat the Krell, but do it in a way that makes every species in the galaxy reconsider what they think they know about humanity." Bennett understood the strategy because humanity's reputation had been built on 30 years of restraint and cooperation. And now that reputation needed to shift from peaceful diplomats to dangerous protectors. The galaxy operates on power dynamics, Bennett said to her assembled senior staff. "We tried to opt out by being reasonable and diplomatic, but that nearly cost us everything. And the only thing predators respect is strength." She pulled up tactical displays showing the Krell forward operating base in the Arcturus sector, where the ships that attacked New Hope were currently resupplying. And the base's defenses looked formidable by galactic standards with multiple shield layers and defensive platforms. "We're going to hit them with everything we've been holding back," Bennett announced while her officers began calculating attack vectors. "No warnings and no mercy, and when we're done, the Krell will understand that humanity chose peace, but we were always prepared for war." Foster highlighted potential targets and began assigning weapon systems to each one. And Bennett approved his targeting solutions while thinking about how different this felt from normal patrol missions, where humans carefully limited their responses. Vengeance and her sister ships represented Earth's true military philosophy. That combined advanced technology with tactical doctrine learned from thousands of years of human warfare. And no alien species understood how dangerous humans were when they stopped holding back. 6 hours later, the Vengeance dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Arcturus sector and immediately launched reconnaissance drones that mapped the entire Krell base within minutes using sensor technology far beyond what humans had previously displayed. The Krell base held 16 ships, including the Dreadnought that led the attack on New Hope, and their crews were celebrating their successful raid, while station personnel unloaded captured equipment and trophies from the colony. Bennett watched her screens show Krell warriors laughing in the station's common areas while human civilians had died terrified and alone just days before. And she felt the last bit of hesitation disappear as she prepared to follow her orders. "This is Captain Bennett to all ships." She transmitted to the human task force that had taken positions around the Krell base. "Admiral Morrison has authorized us to demonstrate humanity's true capability. And we will show the Krell exactly why we've been holding back all these years." Her tactical officer confirmed that all ships were ready and all weapon systems were locked on their assigned targets, and Bennett took a breath while thinking about 3,000 dead civilians who deserved better than to be forgotten in diplomatic proceedings. "Fire," she ordered simply, and the Vengeance unleashed weapons that would change galactic politics forever. The Krell dreadnought's savage glory floated in dock at the forward operating base, while its crew celebrated their successful raid on the human colony. And War Commander Thaxcor stood in the command center reviewing the captured footage that his warriors had recorded for propaganda purposes. The video showed human families running through crop fields while Krell soldiers hunted them with methodical precision. And Thaxcor felt satisfaction in how thoroughly his forces had terrorized the weak species that the Galactic Council protected so carefully. His tactical officer called out a sensor contact at the system's edge, but Thaxcor barely paid attention. Because this was Krell space, and no species dared challenge them in their own territory. And he assumed it was just a merchant vessel taking the long route to avoid tariffs. Then the human ships appeared on his tactical display, and Thaxcor felt a moment of confusion because the sensors showed power readings that could not be accurate. And he ordered his crew to recalibrate their equipment while the human vessels moved into attack positions with speed that should have been impossible. Captain Bennett watched the Krell scramble to respond while her reconnaissance drones fed her real-time data on every ship and defensive platform in the base. And her tactical computer had already calculated the most efficient way to destroy the entire facility. "Target the dreadnought first," Bennett ordered while her weapons officer armed the quantum disruptor that humanity had kept secret for 15 years. "Let's show them what we've been holding back." The Vengeance fired a single shot that crossed the distance between ships in microseconds, and the beam hit the Savage Glory's hull with energy that destabilized the atomic bonds holding the ships. Structured together, Thaxcor saw the weapon impact on his forward display and waited for damage reports. But his crew just stared at their consoles in confusion because the ship was not damaged. Instead, sections of the hull were simply disappearing as matter stopped existing at the molecular level. The cascade effect spread through the dreadnought like a wave of non-existence. And Thaxcor had one moment to understand that he was about to die in a way that defied everything he knew about physics. Before the weapon reached the command center and erased him from the universe, Bennett watched the Krell flagship cease to exist without any explosion or debris field. And she knew that every species with sensors in this sector was recording this moment and trying to understand what kind of weapon could make a ship simply vanish. "All ships engage," she transmitted to her task force, and 16 human warships opened fire on the Krell base with weapons that demonstrated 3 decades of secret development. The Krell defenders activated their shields and returned fire with energy weapons that had conquered a dozen species. But their shots dissipated harmlessly against human kinetic barriers that used captured singularities to deflect incoming energy. Lieutenant Foster directed the Vengeance's railgun batteries at a Krell cruiser, and the magnetically accelerated projectiles punched through the enemy ship's armor like it was paper. And the rounds continued through to strike the cruiser behind it before their kinetic energy finally dissipated. Krell vessels tried to maneuver, but human ships moved with precision that their computers could not match because Earth's tactical AI could calculate battle outcomes 15 layers deep, while Krell systems still relied on predictive algorithms. And every human shot hit critical systems with surgical accuracy. A Krell destroyer attempted to flee toward the jump point, but the human frigate relentless demonstrated speed that should have required twice its reactor output, and the frigate cut off the destroyer's escape route before hitting it with missiles that had an eye guidance system smart enough to anticipate evasive maneuvers. The missiles struck the destroyer's engines and left it drifting helplessly while the rest of the fleet realized they were not fighting an equal opponent. They were prey being hunted by something far more dangerous. Bennett coordinated her task force with calm efficiency, while her crew executed attack patterns they had practiced in secret for years, and the bridge was quiet except for status reports. As human warships systematically dismantled the Krull forward fleet, a Krull commander tried to ram his damaged ship into the Vengeance in a final desperate act. But Foster's targeting computer tracked the incoming vessel, and a single precise shot disabled its remaining engines before it could close the distance. 30 minutes after the engagement began, the last Krull defensive platform exploded under human fire, and Bennett surveyed the tactical display that showed 16 enemy ships destroyed or disabled, and not a single human vessel had taken serious damage. "Cease fire," Bennett ordered while her weapons officer powered down the main batteries. "Scan for survivors and locate the base commander." Her sensor officer reported that one Krull frigate remained intact with minimal damage, and Bennett opened a communication channel to the enemy ship while making sure her transmission was being broadcast on open frequencies that any species in range could monitor. The Krull captain appeared on her screen, and his face showed the kind of fear that predator species rarely experienced. And Bennett saw him understand that his entire military doctrine had been based on false assumptions about human capability. "I am Captain Nicole Bennett of the Earth Human Fleet," she said in a voice that carried the weight of 3,000 dead civilians. "Your forces attacked New Hope Colony and murdered defenseless families, including 500 children. And you did this because you thought humanity was weak." The Krull captain tried to speak, but Bennett cut him off with a gesture that made clear who controlled this conversation. "Everything you know about human military capability is wrong," she continued, while her tactical display showed the debris field that used to be the Krull forward fleet. "We held back for 30 years because we chose peace over violence, and you mistook that choice for weakness." She transmitted footage from the battle showing human weapons that exceeded anything the galaxy had seen before, and she made sure the Krull captain understood that this was not humanity's full strength but merely a demonstration. "You're going to return to Krull Prime and show your leadership this footage," Bennett ordered while highlighting the quantum disruptor, erasing the savage glory from existence. "Tell them that humanity expects the raiders who attacked New Hope Colony to be surrendered within 48 hours. The Krull captain's face showed conflicting emotions between warrior pride that demanded he refuse and survival instinct that recognized certain death if he declined. And Bennett saw the moment when survival won. "If your leaders refuse, then human fleets will come to your homeworld and demonstrate what happens when we stop being gentle," Bennett said while her weapon systems remained locked on the Krull frigate. "We tried diplomacy and peaceful coexistence, and your people responded by hunting our children through crop fields." She let the silence stretch while the Krull captain absorbed her words, and then she transmitted coordinates for where the prisoners should be transferred. 48 hours. Bennett repeated. "After that, we stop asking nicely." The Krull frigate turned toward home at maximum speed, and Bennett watched it go while knowing that every major power in the galaxy was analyzing the battle data and recalculating their understanding of human capabilities. Admiral Morrison's face appeared on her command screen, and he looked older than she remembered. And she knew he was thinking about his sister who died at New Hope. "Good work, Captain," Morrison said quietly. "Now we wait and see if the Krull are smart enough to take the offer." Bennett nodded while looking at the debris field that used to be 16 Krull warships. And she thought about how different this battle had been from the careful, limited engagements that humanity had fought for 3 decades. "Do you think they'll surrender the raiders?" she asked while her crew began damage assessment on the surviving Krull vessels. "If they're smart, they will." Morrison replied. But the Krell built their entire culture on being the strongest predators in their region, and admitting that humans are more dangerous might be harder than facing extinction. Back in the Galactic Council chambers, Ambassador Lisa Crawford watched the battle footage that was spreading across every communication network in known space, and she saw delegates from dozens of species staring at their screens with expressions ranging from shock to fear. Council Speaker Vextel called for an emergency session to discuss humanity's aggressive actions, but his voice lacked the commanding tone he usually employed, because even he understood that the political landscape had fundamentally changed the Torlix Collective. Representatives stood and demanded sanctions against Earth for threatening a council member species. But his words fell flat when several other species pointed out that the Krell had massacred human civilians. First, Crawford watched the debate unfold and remembered every time she had asked the Council for protection or fair treatment, only to be told that humanity needed to be patient and work through proper channels. And she felt no guilt about the shocked faces of delegates who finally understood what humans were capable of. The Krell murdered 3,000 of our civilians, including 500 children, Crawford said into the silence after the Torlix representative finished his speech. They hunted our families through crop fields for sport and recorded it for entertainment, and now you're concerned that War leader Thaxcor stood before the Krell High Command and watched the footage from Arcturus for the 7th time. And each viewing made the truth harder to deny that the Krell Dominion had made a catastrophic miscalculation about human capabilities. The recording showed the savage glory simply ceasing to exist as human weapons erased it from reality without explosion or debris. And it showed Krell vessels that had conquered 12 species being destroyed by human ships moving with impossible speed and precision high. Commander Vexrol slammed his fist on the war table, while his officers argued about whether to surrender the raiders or prepare for full-scale war with humanity. And several younger commanders insisted that the Krell could not show weakness by complying with human demands. "We are warriors," one commander shouted while pointing at the footage. "If we surrender our own to human justice, then every species in the galaxy will see us as cowards who abandon honor to save ourselves." Thaxcor listened to the argument with growing frustration because he had been there at the forward base when human ships appeared and destroyed 16 Krell vessels in 30 minutes. And he knew that warrior pride would not protect them from weapons that defied physical laws. "I was at Arcturus when the humans attacked," Thaxcor said into the angry debate. "I watched the savage glory disappear like it never existed, and I saw our best ships destroyed by an enemy that we never even damaged. And if you think traditional Krell tactics will work against that level of technology, then you're fools." He transmitted his own sensor data from the battle and forced the High Command to see the power readings from human vessels that should have been impossible. And he showed them footage of human weapons hitting targets with precision that suggested they could predict Krell movements before they happened. The humans held back for 30 years. Thaxcor continued while pulling up Earth's diplomatic history. They accepted fleet restrictions and trade limitations and every other constraint the Council placed on them. And we assumed that meant they were weak. Vexrol studied the data with the cold calculation of a leader who survived by understanding when to fight and when to retreat. And his eyes narrowed as he reviewed humanity's secret technological development. "Show me the intelligence assessment on human capabilities," Vexrol ordered. And his intelligence officer transmitted a report that made several commanders shift uncomfortably. The report detailed everything Krell intelligence had learned about humanity in 30 years. And every assumption had been wrong because humans came from a death world so hostile that they evolved as persistence hunters who chased prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. Earth had weather systems that could kill with temperature, extremes and natural disasters that devastated entire regions, and it had predators that hunted humans with venom and claws. and the planet's gravity made humans stronger than most spacefaring species. Humans built weapons capable of destroying their own civilization before they achieved spaceflight, and their history was filled with wars, where they perfected the art of killing each other with increasing efficiency. They call it mutually assured destruction, the intelligence officer explained while showing Earth's nuclear arsenal. They built enough weapons to destroy themselves dozens of times over, and then chose not to use them. And that level of restraint from a species that dangerous should have warned us. Vexral absorbed the information while his officers realized that the Krell had attacked the most dangerous species in the known galaxy and mistaken their mercy for weakness. And the silence in the war room grew heavy with implications. The humans gave us 48 hours to surrender the raiders, Zaxcor said while checking the countdown. We have 18 hours remaining. And after that, they promised to come to Krell Prime itself. He pulled up tactical projections showing what would happen if human fleets attacked their homeworld with the same weapons they used at Arcturus. And the simulations showed planetary defense systems that had protected Krell space for centuries being overwhelmed in hours. We built our dominion on being the strongest predators in the sector, Vexral said quietly while studying the projections. But we just learned that humanity is something we never encountered before. They're predators who chose to be peaceful until we gave them a reason to stop. The High Command debated for another hour while the clock ticked down, and younger commanders argued for honor and warfare while older leaders calculated survival odds and found them unacceptable. Finally, Vexral made his decision and transmitted orders that would change Krell culture forever. Arrest War Commander Grathker and every warrior who participated in the New Hope raid, he ordered while his security forces moved to comply. We will surrender them to human justice within the deadline. The war room erupted in protest as several commanders accused Vexral of betraying Krell honor. But the High Commander's next words silenced them with brutal honesty. Honor means nothing if our entire species is extinct, Vexral said while highlighting the battle footage one more time. The humans demonstrated technology 30 years ahead of anything we possess, and they did it with a small task force while their main fleet remains in reserve. He transmitted intelligence estimates of Earth's total military capability based on what they showed at Arcturus, and the numbers made even the most aggressive commanders fall silent. We thought we were hunting weak prey when we attacked their colony, Vexral continued. But we were actually provoking the galaxy's most dangerous species and giving them justification to show what they've been hiding. And now every species knows that humans chose peace, but were always ready for war. Zaxcor watched as security forces led away 63 Krell warriors who participated in the New Hope massacre, and several of them shouted protests about being abandoned by their own people. This is survival, Vexral said to the assembled command while his decision echoed through Krell society. We underestimated humanity and we're paying for that mistake. But at least we're still alive to learn from it. Meanwhile, at the edge of Krell space, Admiral Morrison's fleet waited in formation while their sensors tracked every ship movement in the system. And the Admiral knew that the next few hours would determine whether humanity fought a war of extinction or established a new galactic order. Captain Bennett's tactical officer reported increased activity around Krell Prime as their government mobilized its home defense fleet. But Morrison noted that they were not moving into offensive positions. They're scared, Commander Stephanie Liu observed while analyzing Krell fleet movements. They're preparing to defend their homeworld, but they're not moving to attack us, which suggests they're seriously considering surrender. Morrison nodded while thinking about his sister, who died at New Hope, teaching children about Earth's ecology. And he struggled with the desire for revenge against the need to be a strategic leader. If they refuse to surrender the raiders, then we go in, Morrison said quietly. And we don't stop until the Krell government understands that attacking humans has consequences that cannot be negotiated away. His communication officer received an incoming transmission on the diplomatic channel, and Morrison authorized the connection while his staff gathered to hear what the Krell had decided. War leader Thaxcor appeared on the screen, and his bearing showed the stiff posture of a warrior forced to accept unpleasant reality. And Morrison saw genuine fear in the alien's eyes. "Admiral Morrison," Thaxcor began in careful English, "the Krell High Command has arrested War Commander Grathker and all 63 warriors who participated in the attack on New Hope Colony, and we are prepared to transfer them to human custody." Morrison felt satisfaction mixed with disappointment, because part of him wanted the excuse to demonstrate more of humanity's capability. But the rational officer understood that surrender achieved their strategic objective. "Have your diplomatic vessel meet our task force at the coordinates we provided," Morrison ordered while transmitting the transfer location. "The prisoners will be tried under human law for war crimes, and the Krell Dominion will accept whatever judgment Earth renders." Thaxcor agreed to the terms, and Morrison saw the moment when the Krell leader understood that his species' reputation as apex predators had ended, and that from now on they would live in a galaxy where humans were the most dangerous force. Back in the Galactic Council chambers, the emergency session continued as species debated humanity's actions. And Ambassador Crawford listened to various delegates express concern about Earth's display of force. The Torlix representative suggested that humans should be sanctioned for threatening galactic peace, and several other species murmured agreement until Crawford stood and addressed the chamber with cold precision. "Let me make something absolutely clear," she began while every translator carried her words across the vast room. "The Krell massacred 3,000 human civilians, and you offered diplomatic censure. But when we responded with force, you want to sanction us for defending ourselves." She pulled up footage of the New Hope massacre one final time and forced the council to confront what had actually happened rather than abstract discussions about galactic peace. "Humanity is not asking your permission to defend itself," Crawford continued while her voice carried absolute certainty. "We are informing you of a new reality where attacking humans or our allies results in." 3 months after the Arcturus engagement, Captain Nicole Bennett stood on the bridge of the Vengeance as her ship patrolled the border regions of the Polax Commonwealth, and she reflected on how much had changed since humanity stopped pretending to be weak. The galaxy knew the truth now about human capabilities, and every species had recalculated their strategic assessments to account for Earth's real military strength. And pirates who once preyed on shipping lanes now avoided any vessel flying human colors or protected by human escort. Bennett's tactical display showed the peaceful trade routes that her ship guarded, and she saw dozens of civilian transports moving freely through space that had been dangerous just months ago on Earth. The trial of the Krell raiders proceeded with careful attention to human legal principles, and Lieutenant Amanda Price served on the military tribunal that heard evidence from the New Hope massacre. The courtroom was filled with families of the victims and representatives from dozens of galactic species who watched humanity demonstrate something unexpected. Even after suffering terrible losses, humans still followed laws and gave the accused proper defense. Price listened as Krell War Commander Grathcor attempted to justify the massacre by claiming his warriors were following standard raiding doctrine, and she saw several family members leave the courtroom rather than hear their loved ones' deaths described as routine military operations. The evidence was overwhelming and included footage from the Krell warriors' own recordings, and the tribunal spent 3 weeks reviewing every detail to ensure their verdict could not be questioned on procedural grounds. Price and her fellow judges deliberated for 2 days while the galaxy watched and speculated about whether humans would execute the Krell or show mercy that their victims never received. And finally, they returned to deliver their judgment, War Commander Grathker and the 63 warriors under your command are found guilty of war crimes, including the deliberate targeting of civilian populations and the murder of non-combatants, including children, Price announced while her voice remained steady despite the emotional weight of the case. She detailed the evidence and explained how human law defined war crimes, and she made clear that the Krell had violated even the most basic principles of warfare that civilized species recognized. The sentence is life imprisonment without possibility of parole on the penal colony Titan Station. Price continued while families in the courtroom showed mixed reactions between satisfaction and disappointment. You will spend the remainder of your natural lives confined as punishment for your crimes, several galactic observers expressed surprise because they expected humans to execute the raiders after such a brutal attack. But Price explained that human justice system distinguished between punishment and revenge. We could kill you, and it would be justified by any reasonable standard, Price said to Grathker directly, but we choose to imprison you instead because we're not the monsters you assumed we were, and because we believe that justice should be about more than satisfying anger. The trial concluded, and the Krell Raiders were transported to Titan Station, where they would live under human supervision for the rest of their lives. And the galaxy took note that humanity balanced overwhelming military force with principled legal systems commander Stephanie Liu briefed Admiral Morrison on intelligence reports, showing how galactic politics had shifted in response to humanity's demonstration of strength. And her analysis revealed unexpected consequences of their actions at Arcturus. 7 species have requested defense treaties with Earth, Liu reported while displaying diplomatic communications. The Polax Commonwealth wants formal protection after seeing what happened to the Krell, and the Vesker Union is offering trade concessions in exchange for human patrol routes through their territory. Morrison studied the requests while considering how Earth's role in the galaxy had changed from supplicant trying to fit in to protector that other species sought alliance with. And he thought about whether humanity was ready for that responsibility. What about hostile responses? He asked while knowing that not every species would welcome human military dominance. The Xyloth Empire is increasing their fleet size, and the Draxo Union is making aggressive statements about human expansionism. Liu replied, but neither is actually moving toward conflict because they saw what happened at Arcturus. Morrison nodded while understanding that humanity's display of force had created deterrence but also raised tensions with species who feared human power. And he knew that managing these competing pressures would define galactic politics for years. Ambassador Lisa Crawford negotiated new treaties that reflected Earth's changed status, and she found herself in the unusual position of having species seek human favor rather than the other way around the Polax Commonwealth. Ambassador met with Crawford in private and explained that his species faced constant raids from aggressive neighbors, and the Polax had watched humanity destroy the Krell forward fleet in 30 minutes and realized that human protection would end their security problems. We've tried diplomatic solutions and Galactic Council intervention, the Polax ambassador said while showing records of failed attempts to stop the raids. But the raiders only respect force, and we don't have military strength to defend ourselves. Crawford listened to the familiar story of peaceful species being victimized while the council debated proper procedures, and she remembered making similar pleas for protection before New Hope forced humanity to stop being gentle. Earth will agree to protect Polax space on specific conditions, Crawford replied while outlining requirements. Any species under our protection must follow strict rules about civilian rights and warfare ethics, and we expect our allies to share our values about protecting innocent life. The Polax agreed immediately, and within weeks, Captain Bennett received orders to deploy the Vengeance to Commonwealth territory. and her ship became the first permanent human presence in another species. Sovereign Space Band established patrol routes and coordinated with Pelok's defense forces, who watched in amazement as human sensors detected threats hours before their own systems registered anything. And she explained that humanity's technological advantage came from 3 decades of secret development. A Pelok's officer named Kelvin joined Bennett's bridge crew as a liaison, and he asked questions about how humans developed such advanced capabilities. While maintaining a small public fleet, we never stopped preparing for the possibility of war, Bennett explained while showing him the Vengeance's classified systems. The galaxy wanted to believe we were weak because it was comfortable, but we knew that peace only works when backed by the ability to defend it. Kelvin studied the human weapon systems and asked how a species could be so advanced in warfare, while also being principled enough to give war criminals fair trials. And Bennett smiled at the question. Those two things aren't contradictory. She replied, "We're dangerous because we understand violence and we've perfected it over thousands of years of human conflict. But we're also civilized enough to know that power without principles is just tyranny." The conversation was interrupted by an alert as Bennett's sensors detected a raid in progress on a Pelok's mining outpost. And the captain immediately ordered her ship to battle stations while Kelvin watched human efficiency in action. The Vengeance arrived at the outpost within minutes, and Bennett's tactical display showed 5 raider vessels attacking the civilian facility, and she opened communication channels to the attackers while arming her weapons. "This is Captain Nicole Bennett of the Earth Human Fleet," she transmitted on open frequencies. "You are attacking a facility under human protection, and you have one opportunity to withdraw peacefully." The raider commander appeared on her screen, and his face showed confusion mixed with contempt. And Bennett recognized his species as Draxil, who had built their economy on plundering weaker neighbors. "The Peloks are weak, and humans are too far away to protect them," the Draxil commander replied while his ships continued firing on the mining station. "Go back to your own space and let us conduct our business." Bennett felt the familiar cold anger that came from watching bullies assume they could continue their behavior without consequences, and she thought about 3,000 colonists who died because humans tried being patient. "I gave you a chance to leave," she said quietly before ordering Foster to demonstrate human weapons capabilities. The Vengeance fired a single railgun shot that passed through the lead Draxil Raider's engines and continued to strike the ship behind it before the kinetic energy dissipated. And both vessels went dead in space with disabled propulsion. The remaining 3 Draxil ships immediately stopped firing on the mining station, and their commanders transmitted surrender signals before Bennett could order additional shots. And one even sent an apology claiming they did not know the outpost had human protection. Bennett accepted their surrender and allowed them to rescue the crews from the disabled ships before departing. And she made sure her actions were broadcast on open channels so every species in the region understood the new rules. "The message is spreading," Admiral Morrison told his staff during a strategic review 3 months after Arcturus. "Raiders are avoiding human-protected space, and aggressive species are reconsidering their behavior. And we're achieving peace through strength rather than